Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Nancy Halpern joining us. Nancy, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So Nancy, for those who don't know you, just take a moment and explain what you do.
Sure. I am a talent development consultant. And what that means is for the past 21 years, I'm hired by typically medium-sized corporations to work with their rising talent and senior leaders who may have hit a roadblock, as well as with their teams who are a little stuck, be that stuck in strategy, be that stuck in cross-functional working relationships. And I have a MBA, which helps a lot to understand businesses. And my background before then was actually I ran a ballet company. And that's helped me as a solo proprietor be very good about being resource constrained.
Well, yeah, I want to really dig into a lot of that. So you mentioned that you work with, in most cases, mid-sized companies, but I do know that you've also worked with large organizations like Novartis and Dow Jones and Bank of America and Ogilvy and Mather, PwC, right? Just a whole bunch kind of across the globe. So take us back, like before consulting. You mentioned that you were running this ballet company. Like kind of what were things like before you got into consulting? Did you go straight from the world of ballet into consulting, or what did that kind of path look like for you?
Well, I rose pretty quickly in nonprofit work after college. I was quickly sort of overemployed for my skill set. And perhaps I'm being unduly modest, but I was pretty scared when they made me an executive director at 26. And I had no idea why a balance sheet had to balance. I had employees, I had school, I had performances, I had stage unions. There was a lot of stuff to deal with. And I was driven to go to business school by two things. One, I thought I really needed to know more. And the second was I hated knowing what I'd be doing at 40 at the age of 26. Because if I stayed on the path I was on, I would have, I assumed, kept rising. And I thought that was boring to know the future that much. So when I went to business school, I ended up going to Yale. And the great thing about Yale is you're surrounded by really smart people. The bad thing was I was really scared again by how much I didn't know. But when I left Yale, I didn't want to go back into nonprofit. And I just sort of stumbled into a job in the retail industry. And after about 6 years, ended up as a vice president for a company that was importing about $1 billion at first cost. And for anyone who's any retail experience, what you pay in a store is 3 times that. And that was like 20 years ago. It was a huge job. I ran warehousing, operations, customer service, and vendor negotiation. So when I was out of a job due to an acquisition by Target, I really wanted to leave that industry as well. I didn't love the retail industry. I felt my impact was small. And when I was in outplacement, I was just looking around and someone else said, there's a consulting firm who's looking to hire a presentation coach. And I knew nothing about that, but I had always been a good presenter. So I went up the street. They were just a block away. And it was part-time, so they were willing to take a chance. And I stayed with that consulting firm for 8 years and grew into a field that was very nascent at the time, which was, frankly, coaching. And I was a little misspoken when I said medium-sized companies, because you're right. I mean, Novartis was my first client at the firm, and they're still a client today. And at the time, I really enjoyed the business development piece of being introduced to a large client and figuring out how to sell in. So I was with the firm for about 8 years. 6 to 8. I then went in-house at Guardian Life Insurance to head talent effectiveness, which meant mentoring and performance management, talent review, succession planning. So I learned the language and the tools of one of my key customers, which are HR. Realized after about 18 months, I really missed consulting. I missed the variety that consultants have. And I cut a deal with Guardian, and they let me go and hired me back as a consultant, but enabled me to build a book of business with other clients that I had left behind when I was with a firm. And I've been on my own for about a little bit over 11 years now.
So when you said that you kind of went back to the book of business that you had, or you built up a book of business as kind of an independent consultant. But it sounds like some of your first clients in that business were actually past clients that you had worked with when you were at the previous consulting company. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So say, how did you navigate that? I mean, not from a legal perspective, although I'm interested actually to explore a little bit around what that looked like. I'm guessing that any kind of, rights that would hold you back from reaching out, like non-confidentiality or just restrictions, were probably expired by that time. But I'm really interested in like digging into, how did you reach out to those people? How did you kind of go back to them? Because I think a lot of consultants have networks or potential assets like that they've built up over the years. And then when they go into consulting themselves, they don't necessarily always know how to leverage those past connections and networks that they've actually built up. So let's just kind of start exploring, like, how did you make that happen? When you left, start your own consulting business, go back to these past clients.
Sure. Well, just to clarify, I did have a non-compete and it had expired.
Got it.
So that was well timed. I think that having a dormant network is one of a independent consultant's both largest assets and biggest stumbling blocks, meaning it's there, but have you really leveraged it to your advantage? When I started my own practice, keep in mind that being out of it for 18 months is not that long. And so no one was that cold. So I just really had people who were warm. The other thing is, whether intentionally or not, and now I do it intentionally, I had formed sort of, I don't want to call them friendships, but let's say business friendships with a couple of key hirers or key people from my consulting days. So I could go back to them and say, I loved working together before. I am now consulting again, or, hey, there have been some big changes in my life. Are you free for dinner? We haven't seen each other in ages. And so I would revive those relationships. It helps, I think, to go back to any former employer or former client, especially if you've done more than one piece of work. And I've also learned that at the first meeting, if you're trying to revive a dormant contact, I don't actually always ask for business at the first meeting. I used to, and I felt always awkward and uncomfortable.
Did it work?
You mean not asking the first time?
No, asking the first time. You said you felt awkward, which I think a lot of people that would resonate with, but did it work? Like, were you getting business as a result of asking for business that first meeting when you're kind of reactivating the network?
Wow, I'm trying to remember back. If I had already done business with them, then it was an easier slide.
Okay.
If it was someone, let's say, I didn't know as well, of course, it's more difficult. Perhaps it was my natural style, Michael, but I found it easier to reestablish the relationship, put a little bit time into it, and talking about the work I've just finished doing. And then seeing how people respond and, asking them what's going on for them. How's the team working out? I think everybody has to find their rhythm. If you sell too hard, you turn people off. If you don't sell at all, you never get a gig.
100%. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Like, I think a lot of people would resonate with that. And when people are faced with, like, I need to generate business now, sometimes the idea of investing more into the relationship and, providing more value up front and kind of letting a little bit of time go on before you start asking for an opportunity to work together scares people, and they want to rush to just say, like, is this person going to work out or not? But I think what everyone sees is, as you deliver more value into a relationship, it may not generate business right away, but long-term wise, it typically works out favorably.
Well, on the flip side, though, I would say that in the early years, I took any piece of business I could find.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I discovered, and I suspect other people do, is some of it I wasn't very good at. And so it helped pay the bills, but I may not get rehired. And I was okay with that, because as an individual consultant, I was learning what I wasn't good at as much as I was what I am good at. And so maybe I don't think it's really contradictory advice. Grab anything you can in the early days if you need to. There's no shame in that, but be open to the fact you may not get a repeat piece of business. And what you're trying to do is narrow down your value proposition.
Yeah, that's such good advice, because you're right. It's the evolution, right? It's not, things aren't getting kind of stuck into stone right away. A lot of consultants, I think, over like analyze or try to have everything just perfect early on. But Rather, it's just getting out there, working with clients, trying different things, seeing what works both for you and for the client, what generates results, and then adjusting your messaging or whatever it's your website or overall value proposition or service offerings as you get real feedback from the actual marketplace and feel what you yourself as a consultant enjoy.
Yeah, I think the other mistake I see a lot of newer consultants make is saying they can do almost everything under a general umbrella. And it doesn't distinguish you. They're so afraid they're going to lose a piece of business that they put 20 things that they can do well. But the truth is then they don't seem to have a niche or expertise in anything. What I have seen some other people do very successfully, it wasn't as successful for me because my background was different, that if you come from an industry, like I know someone and she was HR in, let's say, the event planning space, just for our sake. Well, she was able to go to the Association of Event Planners and suggest things she could speak about, which would expose her to potential buyers. Or she could find the competitors and pitch herself. I knew another consultant who came from the insurance industry, and she was not really good at generating business. She was nervous about it. And we talked about it because she was in the firm. And I said, well, why don't you just focus on the insurance industry? I mean, you're going to speak their language anyway. You will resonate with them. And it really helped her. And then, of course, she didn't just restrict herself there, but it really helped her build a base of business. And I think that's the biggest challenge is how do you build an initial base?
And would that be your suggestion and recommendation for people who want to gain greater traction in their business is to take a good look at where they're placing their energy and focus and potentially we look to further focus and kind of narrow in if they're going too wide?
Yeah, I guess a couple of starting pieces of advice, right? The one is grab whatever business you can because you need to build a list of engagements and you need to practice. So don't worry about it if it's not perfectly right for you. If you can get it, if it's small, it's road work, The second is reflect back on your career and see whose language you speak so that you have an easier entry just because of your own CV. And the third piece of advice when you start is that I was very aware that revenue is unpredictable, but expenses aren't. And so I was really a bear about controlling my expenses, meaning I didn't get a virtual assistant. And even to this day, I don't. I didn't rent an office space somewhere. Even to this day, I don't. Because I wanted to keep my expenses as low as possible since I couldn't predict revenue. And I think that has served me better in the downtimes.
And how about, so today, your business obviously is quite different from when you first got started from an experience perspective and client list perspective and revenue perspective. But you mentioned that to this day, you don't have an assistant. Could that be holding back your growth? Or like what kind of thoughts have you had as you've just explored, like, does it make sense for you to have one or not? Like, why don't you have an assistant? What's the main reason for you today as someone who has a well-developed business?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. A, I never found the right person, so I tried a few virtual assistants, and I realized I need to manage them more than I wanted to. And I didn't want to manage people, which is why I never built a firm. So the things that they could do for me, reports, proposals, documents, maybe, I've decided to limit my social media exposure to only one platform, which is LinkedIn, so I didn't want someone tweeting for me. I couldn't see the value proposition. They didn't free up so much of my time that I was out there pounding the pavement. Because the biggest constraint that I have, and I suspect many of your listeners do, they can't help me with, which is a capacity constraint. Meaning I can only handle really like 4 corporate clients at the same time because there isn't more time and nothing should impact the quality of the work I do. So, there are enough technology tools, certainly for bookkeeping and things like that I have found it more successful to hire specific expertise when I need it on a project basis. So right now I'm transitioning my own business model as a consultant where I'm building a set of tools based on my ideas rather than just selling my time so that I can sort of get away from that capacity constraint.
Right. So you're kind of productizing your service offerings so there'll be a lot more scale and leverage within your business model.
Exactly right.
Right. Okay, so let's kind of continue looking at your business today. So you talked about and shared with us what worked for you initially when you launched the business to kind of get your first few clients and build that book of business. What about today? I mean, what approach is the most effective for you to generate inquiries and leads for your business?
Endless business development. I think I have to spend more time than I'd like. Actually, my work is about finding work. That seems to never go away. And I know for some consultants, they'll tell you they have more work that they can actually handle. A lot of them are lying, but maybe that's just my envy. I find it an ongoing thing. So I will spend probably 4 nights or 5 out of every week taking a client out for a drink, having dinner, staying in touch. On top of that, there are lunches, there are emails. I'll send them off an article or two. I created a database of all my Gmail contacts combined with my LinkedIn contacts. And that list is, 4,000 people. I've shied away a little bit from doing a constant contact kind of letter. I've played with it in the past. I found that blogging really only made my friends and family happy, but didn't necessarily bring new business. I do Harrow, which is help a reporter out periodically, because it did get me in the Wall Street Journal once. It got me on Inc. and Fortune and Forbes and HuffPost a number of times, which are really nice credentials. It's really staying in touch with people and honing your message.
And how much, what percentage of your time when you say about business development do you spend then with existing clients versus reaching out to new clients, like new prospective clients?
While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
I probably spend too much of my time with current and former clients and not enough prospecting, because prospecting is the hardest part. Although I find the best way for me to prospect is to go to small events. Meaning, if I'm going to an event with 100 to 200 people, it's really hard to meet people. Because I don't really like large networking events, I suppose, but it's so, how do you know in that crowd, even if it's in your industry? It's really hard to find the right event where people are the right level. So I recently went to an industry event and I met the local chapter head. So I invited her I belong to a club. I don't have an office, but I do belong to a club in the city. And everyone likes going there. So if I buy someone a cup of coffee or a drink there, they love the idea of getting together again. And so this new person is, head of human resources at a major bank. And I'll just drop a line, I'll make a few comments at the very end of the meeting about some sexy stuff I'm working on. And, hopefully I've bonded. So I really use that first prospecting meeting as a way just to find something to talk about, be it someone's new baby or someone's long commute or the dreadful weather, as a way to sort of break some ice. And that's how I really look at that prospecting meeting.
And so, Nancy, if we just break down that process a little bit, because I think it's quite interesting. So you said, you find relevant events, which I'll come back to in just a moment. You go to the event, you focus on kind of adding value, building a relationship with someone. You invite them to have a coffee or a drink at this club that you're a member of it in the city. And so that's kind of like, just a business country club type of thing. It's like a club, right? You go, you might have a workout area, spas, restaurant, that kind of club.
I belong to a university club.
Okay.
But there's some really sexy places in the city now. There's a place called New House. So these are places that are ostensibly for, sort of upscale WeWorks.
Right.
But the nice thing about them is they have coffee bars and they have plush seating and they're impressive physically.
Right. So people want to go, they enjoy, oh yeah, Nancy's inviting me for a drink or a coffee at this place. That sounds great. Then they meet you, you have a nice conversation. You're not focusing on, it's not a sales conversation. You're just meeting socially. And as a result from that, that may turn into an opportunity to work together.
It may, or a referral. I mean, and referrals are funny things. I just got a referral for a new client I'm meeting tomorrow because I worked with his wife 9 years ago. I mean, and I had an email pop in last year because they were referred by Credit Suisse. I hadn't worked with Credit Suisse in 14 years. So those things are kind of surprising. And I realize that not everyone can afford to join a club. Something else, it's easier being for me in New York City. Something else I've done, in fact, I'm doing this tomorrow night, is I have small social events in my home. So once I had just HR leaders. And even if there were 6 of them, how many vendors, and I've known each of them well, but they didn't know each other. So my hook was, I know a lot of great people. I would love for them to know each other so you could expand your own network.
Yeah, that's such a great, one of our clients, Adam, invites his clients together for like a monthly poker night. And such a great way to build relationships and, add value without focusing on sales. And people just enjoy getting together. I mean, at the end of the day, right, people like to spend time with people that they like. So creating that type of environment, I can see as being really effective. And for us too, when we do events with clients, we just like getting together. It's nice to talk virtually, but being able to actually sit together and share a drink or whatever it might be, there's something special about that. I just want to jump back though to the event because you mentioned that you're kind of targeting specific industry events, or that was one example. Many consultants, I think, feel the same way. Like, just they don't necessarily like going to all different kinds of events. They find it's a waste of time. You're surrounded by a whole bunch of other people just trying to sell you things. So what have you found? What's kind of the criteria that you use to identify whether an event is worthwhile for you to go to or not?
Well, first, the number of attendees, right? I'm looking for things that are somewhere between 20 and 40, if possible. Number 2, a subject I'm interested in anyway, because it will attract like-minded people, or at the very worst, at least I'm not bored and regret it.
Can you give an example? So like a recent event that you went to or one that you're going to, what would that topic be?
Sure. So I'll tell you the one that's coming up. So I've been to a TED conference, and TED does a series of stuff in New York City. So they're having a dinner and presentation, which means it's a limited number of people because they're not going to dinner for that many people on something in science. Frankly, I barely remember the topic, but I would love to give a TEDx talk. I think it would be great exposure for me. And so the more exposure I have to the people in TED New York, because these events happen at TED headquarters, and the more I talk to them about the TEDx talks I'm applying to what my topic is, the more it helps raise my visibility. So that's a good event for me.
That makes sense.
Yeah, another event I went to was it was SHRM, but I don't belong to SHRM.
That's for the HR association, right?
That's correct. But it was an event where I knew one of the presenters, so she pumped me even better. And I made sure to meet the chapter lead who was signing people in, and that's the woman I invited for a drink at the club, she thinks we should have a breakfast meeting and talk about ways to explore working together. There was something else that occurred to me about this. I was going to say that, conferences are really expensive. And so I try to be selective about where I have a shot at. And I also am looking for small speaking engagements. So I jointly produced a small event with 2 other women. And there I met someone who has a personal branding firm. And she reached out to me. Perhaps she wanted me to be a client, or she thought I was a good referral source. And I am a good referral source. I connect people all the time. So she connected me to someone she knows who's president of a financial executives network. And he's invited me to speak at one of their events. And that's great because their members are CFOs, and that's a target market for me. I've been reading Adam Grant, Give and Take, recently, which, I used to be more of a matcher. I thought if I did something for someone, then if after a while, if there was no give back, I would just drop them because there's only so many, hours in the day. A lot of people don't give back, but the problem or the puzzle, I guess, is you don't know when, if, and where, and who will. And so now I just try to be generous. And all it does is mean that more people know my name and what I do. And as long as they're the right kind of people at the level, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's karma. It's interesting. You can see this in so many different aspects of life and business where if you try and just be selective, like, well, maybe I'm going to try and add some value here, but if they don't give back, I'm going to stop. You might then you might hold back, right? Trying to add value for someone else. And that one person is the one person that just loves what you're doing. And that turns into something really, really special. So I've seen this play out too, where if you just kind of give as much value as you can without the expectation of getting something back, in the end, you'll get back a lot more than you put in, or regardless, you'll just feel really good about giving. And I think that's kind of how I've personally seen it, but I know it's played out for that in that way for many others as well.
Yeah, though, I think there's also a strategic reason. And you're right, it does feel good. But I think the strategic reason is it took me a long time to realize you play the long game if you go down this road of solo consulting. I used to think it was a short game. When I had a great year, I assumed every year would be like that. And that's not true. I had my best year probably 4 years ago and my worst year last year. Because really, it's a long game. It's not a sort of in for this, out for that.
How do you deal with that? Because that 100% everyone goes through, and it may not be necessarily like 1 year is good, the next year is bad or whatever. It might just be like week to week, day to day, right? Like these challenges that go on in our mind where our emotions swing and different things are happening. And sometimes people get really down on themselves. It's like a real self-confidence issue, self-esteem, feeling like, am I really cut out to do this? I know I've definitely felt that way. I remember like early on in the business having several moments like that I can still remember today. Looking back, they were no big deal, but I remember at that time, like just really questioning. So when you've gone through those things, how do you deal with it? How do you pick yourself back up? And what have you just found to help you in continuing to march down that path?
I think it's something everyone has, and that you have to expect that it's what you signed up for to get the freedom, right? It's an unpredictable cash flow. So I guess I did a couple of things. One, I always made sure that I had the money for my quarterly taxes. If you pay estimated taxes, I think it's one of the problems is you're earning this money and you think you have this money, but that tax bill's coming up. So always be sort of stocking away that money for your tax bill. The second is I would pick a number which I had to earn. I had to earn. And anything over that was a nice surprise. Once I hit that number, I could breathe a little bit. But the other thing is, frankly, I think you do have to track some of the macro factors that are hitting your business to make sure that it isn't you. I mean, when things took a dip, I would just like brush off my networking and go talk to everyone I hadn't spoken with in 6 months or 8 months or a year.
And did that help you?
Always something fell in my lap. Always.
Do you think, like Nancy, looking back and kind of analyzing maybe the situation, the times where things haven't maybe gone as well in your business, do you think any of it can be attributed to that maybe prior to that things were going really well and you became maybe a little bit comfortable, a little complacent in certain areas around your marketing or prospecting?
Oh, yes. And in fairness, I think you're busy doing the work. It's always a problem of you're either doing the work or looking for the work. But I absolutely think I did. I had all the work I could deal with. And so I didn't worry because it had always been a referral basis. But I think in my field of leadership development and coaching and all those things, the field is saturated now. Everyone is a coach. I've been doing it for 21 years. No one was a coach then. So it used to be easier. And a lot of my clients, big companies or medium size, and by medium, I mean like 5,000 employees, those size companies are looking at more cost-effective ways to do it, from retiring executives to using mobile apps with little coaching hints, so the kind of hand-tailored and or frankly, things like procurement departments would rather vet an Ernst & Young who has, frankly, more liability insurance than I do. It's easier for them to vet two big firms than 30 solo proprietors. So I had to take a look at some of the trends in my business. And I did last year. I did like a 5-year analysis and just took a look at where my business came from, how some of my major clients I still had, but the amounts they were paying me were rapidly declining. What was the number of high-priced engagements I was getting versus low-priced engagements, right? To be able to say, okay, the environment around me has changed. And so I can make 100 phone calls a day, but I can't change the macro environment. What can I do differently so I can stay in business and, make the kind of money that I want to make? And that's when I went out and got some consulting advice from guys who work with thought leaders and help turn ideas into products. But that's a big shift, and that's a big investment for me. It's all my ideas and my experience, but it's being marketed and positioned very, very differently.
Yeah, I think there's some really great points on just looking at what's happening in the market, and also just the realization that you and everyone I think has had, like, you hit different stages in your business, right? Early on, it's just a struggle to get things going. Then when things start going really well, then you hit capacity issues. And then, beyond that, you get so busy delivering that you maybe take your foot a little bit off the pedal, as I call it, on the marketing and prospecting side. And that may not have an impact on the business right away, but it might, months or sometimes even a year or more down the road, all of a sudden the lead flow, right, that well of referrals or well of opportunity starts to dry up. And then people have to think, well, okay, what do I do now? And so one of the best just principles that we've seen is to ensure that you always have your foot on the pedal, that you're always doing some activities in the prospecting, in the marketing department, keeping in touch with your network, the marketplace, adding value, even if it's less, even if you don't have as much time as you did before because you're busy delivering on projects, making sure that you still are having your foot on the marketing pedal to ensure that your lead flow doesn't completely dry out. But a lot of the points you've made there, and I love, and I think especially just looking at ways to create greater leverage within your business model, within your service offerings, and connecting that, kind of align that with what really resonates with the marketplace and your ideal clients currently, is a smart move, because it's all evolution. It's all looking like things don't stay the same forever. So that sounds like a really good for you in your business.
Yeah, and I would say also be open to how technology creates other revenue streams. I mean, I do some work with a company that does all their delivery internally on an internal video system, and they certainly don't pay me my regular fee. But I gain experience working virtually via video platform in a high-touch business. And 2, I don't have to find the business, and I can build those relationships too. So that's a nice little other revenue stream. And so if it produces, $15,000 a year, that's $15,000 I didn't have before without having to find it. So, be open to partnerships, be open to collaborations, be open to contracting work. I mean, most people go into this because they're independent minded. Some people stitch together stuff like a nice big quilt. Other people are individuals and they end up with, one big term engagement. But relying on a few clients is always a precarious situation. I know it happens to me all the time. You have great clients, they're big, and so you're drinking from the fire hose, but after a while, it's going to slow up.
Yeah. And you can drown, right? You can rely too much that there's not enough diversification, too many eggs in one basket. And you're right, that can catch people off guard. So it's important to always stay on top of that. Nancy, thank you for coming on here, sharing some of your journey and best practices and experiences with us. I also want to make sure that people can learn more about you and your work. Where's the best place for them to do that?
It is nancyhalpern.com.
Perfect. We'll have that linked up, full transcript, show notes, everything else at consultingsuccess.com. Again, Nancy, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Michael.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.